started. Why not? So Robin just distributed some new schedules for us, which we appreciate, and maybe we can walk through those. I was also hoping, when we talked about this, at the end of the meeting, have a summary of our variances. I think you usually do that for us, Greg, so in written form. So what are the key drivers behind the numbers for the variances? Because that's what, people want to know and the board would have questions about, so why not?
Yep.
Get that information to them, at least by the meeting, but maybe
Yep.
we could do before, that would be fine too. So that they're fully informed of the finance committee. Okay, well, so who wants to kick this off? Anna or Greg? Greg?
I would love to have Greg talk through the particulars of the numbers. I can't take responsibility or ownership for crunching these numbers. It was really Allison and Robin and Greg working together, putting their heads together. So I thank and commend them for their hard work. They did review it with me, and I can speak to some of the nuances as Greg goes along. But Greg, can I ask you to walk us through the budget?
Yeah. And certainly ask questions as we go through. I really want to focus on a couple of the big, what I call needle movers, like in terms of really our fee revenue and our workforce development program. Prefer to focus on some of those bigger items because those will impact our budget significantly. Some of the other stuff is more, status quo stuff, and that's a good point. The good news about where we are in terms of variances, as you're going to see from what we're projecting for 23 and where we think we're going to be for 24, there are very few significant material variances. Mm-hmm. We'll point them all out, and we'll go through those buckets, mm-hmm. and we'll provide you that detail, after this, and we could do that. But let's talk about them and talk about some of the things that I think that this committee really needs to focus on.
I love our projected year-end numbers.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
And again, I really want to focus on, again, projected, right? So look up top, projected 2023. And as you can see, Allison, we're passing out a new as of today because we're trying to get as best updated information to you when we know it, right? So if we have a good probability that something's going to close, you want to include it, right? Because it changes so fast. So that's why you have some of these numbers here.
Can we add a new column on the projected budget variance?
To have the comments?
The percentages actually on the chart.
It is to compare to 24. Do you want to compare it to 23's budget?
I'm just wondering, how close we're getting to meeting budget. Are we under, over?
It's fine.
This variant, so you're saying you'd like,
Between the projected 23 and the budget 23.
It's fine. Yep, it's easy.
Numerical.
okay, so you'd like an
Budget
additional
variance
percentage
percentage.
column beyond that, so
Yeah,
so
yeah,
there is
a
a
new
variance
column.
column.
Wow,
Yeah.
it's exciting. Things are happening.
So
Yeah.
projected versus actual for 23.
We'll
Got
just
it.
add that.
Yes.
We did it for 23 to 24, but we can certainly do that 23 to 23.
Okay,
Okay? Yeah, that works.
great.
So let's talk about, again, right, we're talking about projected to 23 budget and then 24 budget, right, what we're anticipating. The interest income is really a result of what we consider our excess cash, right, the things that we don't need to really have in our working capital to use for our short-term needs. We're anticipating that to be about $330,000 as we get to the end of the year. Obviously, going into this year with the rates, knowing what we were, knowing that where our excess cash was going to be, because we remember at the end of last year we had $5 million that we generated in workforce development. Not knowing that would probably we're taking a little bit longer to spend that. We didn't have as much excess cash as we had anticipated because we thought, hey, we've set aside $5 million. We were going to probably spend that in 2023, knowing what we looked at, but again, not knowing where we were. This is a year ago where we put that budget together. I don't think rates were anywhere near where they were 12 months ago. So that's why our budget numbers is very minimal. And like I said, we're projecting about $330,000 of interest income, by the end of the year.
So I have a question. So on the numbers again, we've got a column that is the 23 budget, and then we've got a column that's the 24 budget, and then we have the budget variance, budget to budget, right? But the numbers are different on the initial schedule that we got versus what you just distributed.
Well, because
If
some
you
of the
look
numbers
at the
changed.
budget variance schedule,
Yeah.
numerical schedule, the numbers are not all the same as they were on the first.
So the fee
Yeah.
income, I actually updated the fee
Updated.
income this morning.
Is that what you did? Okay.
Yeah, based on that and the workforce.
If you said that, I'm sorry. I
That's
didn't
okay,
hear
no,
that.
I just wanted to have you have the latest number, because the latest number's better than the one that I
Okay.
So I wanted to give you that.
So that's why some of them are the same and
Yeah.
some of them are
Yeah,
different.
there's only
Okay.
two.
There's only two numbers that changed, and so,
And that changed a
Real
lot.
time.
Okay.
real
They
time,
wanted to
real
see-
time.
Right.
This is real time.
They wanted to see who was paying attention.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right,
We
right.
know, we
You
know.
caught them.
We're sharp. We
A
catch 'em
plus.
all.
So sticking with interest, right, there's two big variables that we're talking about with interest income and looking at next year. And that really depends on how much we consider, how much excess cash or cash that we're going to invest, whether that's in what our current position is, which is U.S. Treasuries, or we do something different. And, so the thought is that, we're gonna have some significant outlays next year with respect to our workforce development program. We're gonna continue to deplete what our cash is. Currently, we're at about $10 million, give or take, of what we invested into treasuries, right? And we're gonna, depending on what closes, but let's say that even over the next 3 months, our excess cash is gonna come down because we're gonna be spending more than we're taking in, right? That's what we anticipate. And then certainly over the next, from 1/1/24 to 12/31/24, you can see that we have about a $1.2 million deficit, right? We're gonna be spending more than we're bringing in terms of fee revenue. Now, the expense side is a lot easier to project, right? We know what 90% of our expenses are, except the workforce development timing is gonna play a little bit. The hard thing that we always have is, what is our fee? What is gonna close? Are we gonna have a Fairlight that pops up? Are we gonna have certain products that just kind of come out of nowhere? We can't, it's hard for us to predict that, right? So we try to use what we can, when we write these. And as of today, we think we're gonna have a deficit of about $1.2 million. So that's gonna eat into what we call our excess cash, the amount that we have available to put into investments. My assumption is that based on, if we start with 10 million, right, as that's where we are today, we're probably gonna have a little bit of less excess cash as we go through the next quarter. And then if we're gonna have a $1.2 million less on average next year, I used a factor of, I used an excess cash number next year on average of $7 million at 5% is gonna generate us $350,000.
Conservative.
Right? It could be, we could close a Fairlight project and that may happen, and all of a sudden we have, $3 million extra dollars, and then we can do that, and all of a sudden that number is now 500,000? Absolutely. But then, what if rates go down a point? Then we're saying, okay, well, we were at 7 million, at 5% was 350, but now we're at 10 million at 4%, so what do we try, we're at 400,000 on average, right? So those two big variables are really what drives that number. I think what we're trying to do is put our best assumptions together that makes sense for the committee and that we present to the board that says, hey, this is a fairly conservative number. We want to continue to spend into our workforce development program, the things that we want to do, and that number, and we can't predict on what's coming in and what's going to close, and I don't want to sit here and say, hey, we're going to generate $5 million next year, and we put that in our budget, and all of a sudden someone says, hey, you said you're going to generate, $1 million of interest. Well, you're at 350,000. What happened?
I think compared to what we've been generating, it's all a bonus.
Yeah.
So whether it's 7 million or 10, nobody should be crying over it. Why isn't it 10?
And again, we could sit here and put a bunch of analysis into, hey, this is gonna hit this when, but for what's the benefit there, right? So it's really just trying to put the two big variables in there is the rate, which I think, you know, and people know, like, I don't know if anyone's had a great prediction of what that's gonna look like, whether it's up or down the Fed, and you can watch 5 different things and read a ton of different things, but understanding that, hey, I think conservatively, if we say, hey, we think we're gonna have less excess cash here to invest into what we're ever doing because we're spending money, we're gonna be spending more than what we're taking in. And if we think rates are gonna, you know, stay flat.
And that would be the workforce development fund.
Yeah.
So you're saying we wouldn't set a new benchmark for the fund if we're bringing in less revenues
Right.
than we had budgeted for? We're not gonna say it's 4 million this year, it's 5 million next year. We're gonna try to just leave it at the 5 million?
Well, whether we want to put more money into the overall fund is more of a board consideration, you know.
I think what Greg's saying is we're at 10 million right now, but there's gonna be at this point, we're looking at
Right.
a shortfall for
So
next
do we
year's
adjust
budget.
that?
So that's
Fund.
that's gonna reduce what
The fund?
gets in
Yeah.
the fund.
Well, it's not gonna reduce the fund. It's not gonna reduce
Funds
the
that are available.
the funds that are
10%.
available, yeah. I mean, we're gonna spend the money that we have generated in our workforce development fund. We anticipate that we're gonna spend, you know, a big chunk of that next year. You know, if we just look at, we're using a 5.1 million, this is my memory, $5.1 million number that we have generated since inception. We spent about, I think, 370,000 in 2022. We're anticipating 1.6 million by the end of this year, so that gets us to, call it 2 million for round numbers,
Still have a lot
right?
of growth
2
in
million.
there.
And we're
Yeah.
gonna spend 1.8 next year, that gets us to about 3.8 million of that 5.1.
Mm-hmm.
And that means that we're probably, again, still gonna be spending into 2025 of our original 5.1 million.
Good, because the fund's always growing.
Because the fund's always growing,
Percentage of
and we just,
fees
you know,
that
again,
we
and
take.
we,
Yeah.
we don't, again, there's just not, you know, like, the programs that we're supporting and committing to, they just can't get up and running fast enough and spend the money that we're allocating them. It just doesn't happen in 6 months or 12 months, right? It takes them a little bit of time to get the funding, get all their, you know, ducks in a row, all the procedures and processes in place, and then, okay, hey, what are we doing here? And then, you know, by the time they do that, you know, it probably is a 12 to 18 month look, and that's probably what if I had to guess right now, like, hey, of that 5.1, we're probably looking at probably, if we're just talking about that probably would be fully expended probably by middle of 25.
Right, we've got one that goes out for 3 years. So
Yeah, something like that. So, you know, and again, whether the board wants to
Bless
put more dollars, funds into the workforce development that we can spend. I mean, that's obviously a board decision and something to consider. And even if the board wants to consider how we spend our interest, right? Because that's money that you know, that is, you know, kind of new to us in this environment. We haven't really set, we haven't said, hey, what are we doing with that? Do we want to do something specifically with that? I mean, that's certainly a board consideration to, hey, we want to specifically allocate expenses to the funds that we generate here. I mean, that's something to consider.
So does that mean at 6 months and 12 months when these, you know, we've got the numbers that we've gained
Yeah.
because of the interest growth, should we have a discussion, okay, what do we want to do with this, just let it grow? I mean, the committee would, 6 months into the, you know, the years
Yeah.
period?
It may be an overall consideration of it. Maybe it's not a, hey, we want to look at what we generated for a certain period of time, but an overall consideration. Hey, we're generating money from our investments at, you know, an interest.
And what do we want to
What
do
do we want to
with
do
it?
with it?
Right.
What do we want to do with it? Do we want to just, hey, next
it
year,
grow.
let it grow and continue to do what
Right.
we're doing? Do we want to set it aside for anything specifically? I don't think, and it's a, hey, every quarter, every time something matures, we say, okay, now we got
More money.
I don't think we need to do that. I think it's more of a theoretical approach to, hey, is there something that we want to consider doing that we haven't done, or now that we have this, That's what I would recommend.
I think we need to be cautious about the financial environment that we're in. And I don't think it's going away anytime soon. So, so I'm thinking that, you know, if our workforce development funds the excess money that we put towards workforce development is gonna be good until mid-2025, we still have time to take a look at, do we add more? We don't have to make that decision right now, right? Is that?
Right, and nor do you have to wait till 2025. and go,
Right.
Oh, whoops, let's do something different here if it's
Yeah.
not earning what we expected it
Yeah.
to do, or other things have come up since then.
I just think to as committee and as the board to know that there's some additional funds to maybe do certain things with. I think it's nice to have in your back pocket if you ever want to decide to do
Don't
something.
tell
like that.
Adam, okay? I know.
Well, and I don't have, you know, there's no
That was
pressure
just
coming
being
from the county
funny,
executive's
but-
office either at this point in time,
Yeah.
you know, when and if there's some program that they think would be a good investment,
They'll
and
let
when
us
and if
know. Yeah.
we don't find ourselves in the same financial position,
Will.
we'll have that discussion, right?
I think
Right
he's
now, we're in a good place.
extremely pleased with what we've done so far
Yes.
with the fund.
Yeah.
So,
Thank you.
plowing it back into the community.
So, interest, again, I don't know, if, you know, you guys have all great perspectives on, like, again, from those two big variables, the amount of excess cash and the rate, again, that's what we're using, right? That's kind of what we came up with some sound assumptions about, hey, this is currently where we're at, we think we're gonna eat into that a little bit, we're certainly gonna think we're gonna have a cash deficit next year because we're spending our money, and the excess is 7 million at 5%. On average, right, that's gonna go up and down, and that's why we came to 350,000. Any questions or?
Can we talk about some of the variances? Starting at the top,
Yep.
beyond revenues.
Yep, I just wanna go through the big pieces here, Ann, like the big pieces in terms
Okay.
of the interest income. I'm gonna go fee revenue, and then we'll talk
Okay.
about the
All
variances
right.
as we get
Good.
into that. Yeah, absolutely. Does that make sense, right? I mean, Lisa, you guys, I mean, 350, I mean, is that, I mean, do you think it's, look, it could be conservative, but on the
No,
flip
that's what
side-
we want it to be.
Right, we want it
Yeah,
to be
you want it
conservative.
to be.
I
That's
think
what
if-
we want it to be.
Right, I don't wanna say, hey, we think rates are going up, or we're gonna have $12 million of excess cash because we think Fairlight's gonna close, and it's gonna close here, and all of a sudden we're saying 12 million at 5%, and where's that 600 grand? I don't wanna,
Right.
I think this is a good approach, and,
Greg, are we laddering
Yeah.
the T-bills?
Yeah. Yeah, and we just, our recent one just expired, and we just bought into the first quarter of 2025, right? So we just repurchased the ladder, right?
Yep,
At I think
overfund.
2025 was like 5.18%.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, if rates go down and we're getting 5.18% into 2025, it's pretty good, right?
Yeah.
So, obviously, the flip side of that is if they go up, but that's why the whole ladder process we think works, because obviously, we have shorter term ones that expire that we can get out of and do something different with.
Yeah, I think that the 5% is gonna be around for, at a minimum, for the next year, maybe couple of years. So taking advantage of it like we're doing, I think is wonderful.
Yeah, and again, the interest, I mean, again, we're continually gonna, again, like even today, I'm meeting with my team, and we'll send communication on, but like, I still think we have a little excess cash right now. I mean, we initially bought a little over $10 million. I think we have a little bit more that we may wanna do something in the short term. We're gonna do something with it. We're gonna bring it to the committee to consider that, but like, we're not just sitting there and being like, okay, we did 10 million, we're just gonna let it go. Like, we're looking,
agree.
we're gonna look at that and say, hey, this is what I think we may have a little bit more excess cash in the short term. We may wanna do something with it.
When did we first start? With the T-bills? Oh, not July.
For July 31st is when we purchased.
Okay.
Okay, we did anywhere, I think we did 5 blocks from 3 to, call it, 3 months to 15 months. 3, 6, 9, 12, 15. Okay,
I do remember.
and you got a current report of that. And that's through M&T and Wilmington Trust. I'll move on if you guys are good with that, like, in terms of the interest side. We can maybe dive into the investments a little bit after the overall budget, if you want to do that a little bit more in detail and talk through that. I want to talk a little bit about our projected, because again, these are the big items, our fee income, right? Where we think we're going to be, and that was the latest edition of Allison's reprint here. I mean, we think we're going to be pretty close to 2.4 million, based on, a couple of things that are late developments. There's a couple big pieces in there, Andrews Terrace and another, was it the Pike Bond or something, right? That those are the two big pieces that we think are going to close by the end of the year. That represents about almost $2 million, I think 1.975, half of the Andrews Terrace and the Pike, right? That's going to add to where we were. So that gets us, we're projecting fee revenue of about $2.4 million. We budgeted $2 million, knowing that the year was going to be, we thought, a little softer because of all the work that we did in 2022 to get a lot of stuff closed. But as we see, there's still some big opportunities out there. That represents, and next year we're budgeting about flat, 2.5 million, because like anything else, I mean, it's a very good assumption of where we were in terms of things that we're only trying to work on the things, the Fairlife project that can change that 2024 budget like that, right? We certainly, again, I don't believe it's been brought to the board quite yet, and it's more obviously a lot of the discussions, but that's why those things change so fast, and we don't want to spend hours and hours analyzing something that is, there's just too much uncertainty. But overall, we think again, a 4% increase over our fee revenue where we think it's going to be to next year is fair. That's where we get from the 2.4 million projected to the 2.5 million fee revenue for next year. Although, again, like I said, that can change at a moment's notice.
Sounds good,
Good.
right?
Let's talk in big buckets here, payroll, and talk about like variances, like Ann indicated. Our projected payroll and related benefits this year was about $311,000, or that's what we projected. Our budget was $309,000. So you talk about variance, I would say between Robert and Allison, they did a great job putting those numbers together, because there's very minimal variance when you talk about a couple $1,000s to budget. And again, it's interesting. That's because, hey, we added one person, but there's something else that didn't happen, but it just ended up working out that what we're projecting and to what we had budgeted are pretty consistent. And then that increase, and that you see from, hey, we projected 311, and next year we're going to be at 358. That, remember, we added Amy, who I believe was an intern. We added her. She started midway through the year, and she'll be full
She started in July.
July, and she's gonna have a full year of, she'll be full year on staff, next year, so that's where that 15% increase in '24 compares to our projected '23, anticipated spend.
So 20% budget variance, 23 to 24 for benefits, and 19% on salaries.
Yes, yep. Anticipating, obviously, benefits is always one that is one that's hard to pinpoint, but, based on, yeah.
And workers' comp.
Yep, yeah, workers' comp is up,
Down.
is down a little bit. That's, again, that's just that's not a big enough number to move the overall needle of, hey, the whole overall payroll bucket is 15% increase.
Okay.
All right, let's talk our program, community development. That's really where the other big piece of this is. And as you can see, if we go line by line, where our projected numbers are, where our budget is, and where we anticipate, those first three lines, well, GRE and the Empower, they're right on to what we kind of had projected and our budgeting for next year. You'll see that I think it was last meeting we approved the economic gardening.
Yep.
And again, I would, and maybe Anna has more, I would anticipate that being a annual consideration based on the benefit that it provides to the community, but
Yeah, I can throw in a couple of comments there. It's a high-performing business retention and expansion program. Greater Rochester Enterprise does provide us with a number of leads. Many of the projects that we approve on a monthly basis for benefits come to us from GRE, particularly those competitive projects, the bigger projects. And the economic gardening program is geared towards smaller and medium-sized businesses that need some additional technical assistance to get to a certain point where they're ready to grow beyond 100 employees. And recently just was recognized by the IEDC as one of the more excellent economic gardening programs in the United States. So we'd like to continue along with supporting that. We support it through MCIDC at the same level, and this was a longstanding request from GRE that MCIDC and COMIDA both come together to support economic gardening. So we'd like to see that continue.
so you'll see that's in there for 50,000 for next year. PTAC, right? So PTAC will fall generally where we anticipated our budget number is. We do anticipate them coming in front of the board, I think, for an increase of about 40%. I think based on the program, the success of the program, they're looking to hire an additional person is really where that additional funding comes in.
Is this a wash account? I'm trying to remember.
So it's a great question because you'll see at the bottom where the
Right.
wash comes in,
Yeah.
right? So this is COMIDA's commitment to that program. That is an absolute expense. Down below is where you'll see we get monies come in and then we spend it, so that's more of the wash. But COMIDA's expense outlay is the $101,000. That is money that's coming out of our account and going to the PTAC program, right? So that is the net. And again, the budget for next year is probably going to be about $140,000. What we're anticipating
Is
right
that
now.
federal? Those are federal dollars. that come
Yeah.
in.
Yeah.
There will be a 85%, excuse me, not 85%, but a 65%, 35% match.
So that 140 for next year represents the max that we would need to pay for PTAC. She's currently applying for, long story short, she's currently applying for an 85-15, where we pay 15% and the DOD pays 85%.
I see.
And if that's the case, if she gets that, which is 99% likely that she will get it, our total payment would actually only be 92. But if an off chance she doesn't get that and we have a 65-35 split, that's the 140. So we budgeted for
That
the
makes
max
sense.
in case she didn't get that, but I don't anticipate us actually spending that much.
Okay.
So in effect, in that 99% likelihood that we get the match, the 85% match, we're effectively reducing COMIDA's financial contribution to the program, but growing the impact of the program, right?
Yeah,
Right.
she's looking to hire another person. They've expanded and their program has grown significantly, so
Great.
it's actually really well.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Workforce development, we touched on that, right? It's a little bit of a moving target where we were. We anticipate being around for an expense about 1.6 million. That's what we budgeted. Again, we're somewhat at the mercy of the programs and when they get going and when they provide us with their expenses. But again, we've done a pretty good job. Kudos to Allison to try to really schedule this out in terms of here's all the programs that we've committed to and all the programs that are in place. When
We'll
we
have
expect-
that detail for the board members.
We can,
for the
yeah,
meeting.
we can,
Yeah.
yeah, we
Yeah.
have that, yeah, in terms of what that looks like and, that we feel is gonna be about 1.6 million. Again, we scheduled it out next year. We anticipate that being a little bit more, a little over 1.8 million. Again, a lot of variables in there in terms of when programs get up and running, but we have put a schedule together that anticipates what that exact number is. And that represents about an 18% increase of our current spend. In terms of the overall, we always kind of budget, some additional dollars in our other bucket. And just in terms of trying to put, some dollars for unanticipated programs. And, this year's was that the RDDC? What was this year's 200,000?
So we took out, yes, RDDC out of that, because you guys wanted that to come out of operating rather
Yeah.
than workforce development. So that's where that came out of, and so we're taking, I think it's half this year and half next year is coming out of that.
That's the Downtown Ambassadors Program.
Yeah, yeah, that's where that 300 is the downtown ambassadors program for next year. That has already been
That's good.
committed, right?
Yeah.
So overall, you can see that our program community development is up 17% of where we were this year. And again, if it was up double that, I wouldn't put you behind me. That's the whole point of us, allocating $5.1 million to it. And again, we'll continue to look at what that, kind of how that shakes out. Let's look at our overall general administrative expenses. As you can see, I really want to just focus on the bottom line there, and we can go through lines if you guys have questions. But overall, we're projecting about $760,000 of expenses. We budgeted $780,000. Again, pretty good, budget perspective. We'll only being off, a little bit less than $20,000. We are anticipating a little bit more next year. Again, I think there's really, we're anticipating about a 6% increase overall. And I think the big pieces of that are really,
The dues and subscriptions, so we use ProTrack now. We're gonna
That's right.
take care of that next year.
That's right.
And then a little bit more for the liability insurance.
Yeah. So those are the big two pieces to that, but, overall, I don't see anything in there that's, a lot of the expenses are flat or minimal, and there's a couple of accounts that are up, besides the ProTrack, everything else is, up a few $1,000.
So the increase in legal fees, that must be an error.
Well,
Clearly.
I just saying, Rachel was paying
again,
attention.
I would tell you that it's generally what we've been budgeting. We don't anticipate spending that amount of money this year. Rachel wants to count, but I don't know.
Well, we do have pending litigation,
Yes.
and it is a truncated litigation in Article 78, so it won't be, the expense of some prior litigation that we've had, but I would anticipate
An increase.
an increase.
We should budget for it.
And we'll be billing on a monthly basis for that, so you'll see it at each board meeting, financial report, you'll see.
So, to summarize, again, we anticipate being, our loss being, quite a bit less than what we had anticipated. Obviously, there's two big components to that, maybe one big component to that. And then the biggest thing is our interest that we generated and our fee income. I mean, that represents that's $700,000. That's why we're about $700,000 off from what we had projected to our budget, right? We had projected a $1.5 million deficit. We're going to be at about $845. And then if you look at the two big numbers, well, we're generating interest income of $330,000 and then generating projected fee revenue of $400, which we take those two together, $730 plus the $845 gets you right to the number. Those are really, it's an easy explanation this year because our variances fall into just really three buckets, right? Interest, fee revenue, workforce development, and that's not even that big to what we have budgeted. So overall, our comparison to our budget is in two items, interest income and fee revenue. And that's it. So pretty simple explanation really to the board about, hey, this is what we have budgeted, this is where we think we're gonna end up. If we focus on those two areas, and nothing else is even material enough to even talk. I mean, we got 49,000 of program and community development that we're off, and 2,000 of payroll, and 19,000 in G&A. Those numbers on a $2-3 million budget just are almost what I would say immaterial. We can mention them, but those aren't moving the needle like these other two categories are.
And Empower is flat, basically.
Yeah, it's a 3-year program that we started back in September of 22 that we've committed about $500,000 a year. So.
Is that right?
Yep. So overall, like I said, I think that budget's going to be a little bit better than what we budgeted last year. It's going to be a little bit more of a deficit than we're projecting for 23. And again, I think that really relates to spending a little bit more. The big difference there is spending a little bit more in our workforce development program.
Mhm. Okay.
Thoughts, questions?
Thoughts, questions?
Well, and I would say overall too, like, and we've all been around companies and businesses generally when we budget, $1 billion deficit, right? But again, we're, different organization, different type, and the balance sheet, cumulative, our assets, have allowed us to do this, right? The whole point of the organization is to be able to, certainly put back the dollars that we have generated from all of these projects back into the community. And so, certainly to budget a deficit usually gets people a little bit, why are we doing this? Are we okay doing this? But again, our balance sheet is strong, very strong. We still want to be conservative, right, and stuff like that. But I think doing all of those different things, hitting the things that we're talking about, generating fees, being conservative, putting back the money that we've generated back into these community development projects, and next year's budget really does all of that.
Okay. Any suggestions on any extra information we should get to the board? I mean, you're going to do a little narrative there on some of the bigger variances and what was driving them.
I don't know if it would help provide a summary highlight, like where we don't. I don't know, like if we.
Yes, please.
Let me do that in terms of comparing. So you may not
Year
have to
over
go into
year.
a lot of the detail.
Yeah, I mean,
Like
we'll
I can-
give them the detail, but
Yeah.
the key drivers of the variances, whether they're good or bad,
So
what were they?
let's do.
And on
these.
like fee income, how much did we have in the largest projects? And how much were they? Just a little to sort of summary.
Allison, 4 things. Key highlights of the budget compared to 23 budget and 24. So we're talking points more for the budget percent variance column for 23. Summary of the key variances as noted, and then the workforce development fund schedule that we have. We can certainly provide that. And those 4 things we can add to the package and give some more detail. But I think it'd be helpful to get the highlight. So we can
Yeah, I
talk about
appreciate that.
like the bucketed pieces versus
Right.
going into some of the detail. I don't know if someone cares that our payroll is $2,000 higher than we had anticipated. I don't want to.
Let's just focus on the major drivers
Okay.
and the significant buckets.
Yeah.
Do we need anything else on the holdings detail, earnings that we're getting, anything? Did you want to talk about that anymore?
I think, so there's a couple things that we have passed out our balances, just so you guys see in terms of where we have our money. So we have a savings account with M&T That savings too is our money market, that we're getting 3% on, that $2.297 million, we get 3% on that. The checking account is where we have our operating cash, and the P-TAC is really separate from us. It's under us, but just so you know, we don't really have a lot to do with that. We don't look to invest or do any of that. And then you can see what our treasury investments are. So overall, our cash and related cash equivalents through September was a little over $13 million.
So the cash that's available for spending, we had some really big bills that came in. We're showing how much we have invested at this point, in the treasuries and so on. Are you comfortable with that number?
Right now, we have about, again, as of September, we had 720,000 in our operating account. Right? And so I do anticipate that's a pretty
Pretty
good number for us.
robust.
You know,
Okay.
we want to try to keep it under, was it 500? 750 was the number, right? Yeah. We transferred, yeah.
We don't wake up in the middle of the night saying we have enough to pay the bills tomorrow.
No.
Whenever I submit a big one, I go check the accounts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just like I do.
Can I do
Make
that?
sure I got it.
Yeah, we try not to cut it too close because then all of a sudden we'd be just transferring money back and forth. And, but like, hey, we generally try to keep the operating account between 750 and 500.
Yeah.
That's kind of what we think about. And then if something comes in and we say, okay, we got access, then we take that money, we'll put it in the money market to kind of start because at least it gets us 3%. And then that 2.29 million is what we have in the money market. That's the money that I think we may take a little bit more of that and consider buying another T-bill. Right, to get, again, if we're getting 5.25 versus 3, 2.25 is better than, just a little bit more. So we're looking to do all of that. Certainly a lot more activity, right, which is good.
And perhaps more, as you alluded to several
Yeah.
times during this meeting, depending on what comes our way
Yeah.
in the next few months. If we had a fair life, when would we actually start realizing revenue from that? Would that be like a year from now?
Rachel, can you take that question?
I think it could potentially be as early as this quarter. If they take their if it gets approved and they take their sales tax benefits, we would charge a quarter of the entire fee at the time they took the sales tax
I
package.
guess and that's probably true, I'm sure it is. I think what I was thinking of, we're preparing that land for, Fairlight to build their facilities, so they start generating revenues from that. But right now, we're just talking about infrastructure with RG&E.
Well,
and
both.
stuff.
So the infrastructure money will hopefully be coming in and then out
Mhm.
pursuant to the state agreements. And then separately, if we approve the benefits to Fairlife at the upcoming meeting, that'll be an additional. Now, well, not an additional, because I think we're just charging the project fee as we normally would. I don't think that there's an additional fee being charged as a result of the state money.
But the revenues generated overall from that,
Yes.
how does that compare to Amazon, for example?
Much more, and
We've
much
touched that, some of this.
due to project size.
Yeah.
Yeah, our fees are based on the project size, so it is a much bigger project than we've seen
Mhm.
historically compared to any other.
Life Cycle was the biggest.
Yeah, and that
previously.
fee was.
That's true. Yeah.
So here we're growing, it's going to be a larger fee than we received from Life Cycle.
So, because I wasn't at the last meeting, was the project, is it still taking care of the property itself, or have they accepted this location?
Fairlife.
Yeah.
The project is still, it's still tentative. I think conversations with the project owner are moving in a very positive direction and everything. Their only, I think, concerns and some uncertainty has been in dealings with the town of Webster and some potential pushback, I guess, but that's been, we're past that now. The town has stated support for the proposed pilot, so as COMIDA, we feel confident that we have everything that we need to bring the application forward for the board's consideration. And our piece of it is pending a board vote on Tuesday the 17th. So at that point in time, I think it's pretty well confirmed that the project is going right ahead and moving forward.
Thank you.
Okay. Anything else on the agenda for today? For the committee? Do we have to approve minutes from the last finance committee meeting?
It wasn't on the agenda.
The last meeting, I remember, we weren't all here, so it was kind of like not really a meeting, wasn't it?
That's probably true.
I can't remember, we couldn't vote or we couldn't do anything in the last
We didn't-
meeting.
Yeah,
That's
we
right.
didn't have a
Because
quorum.
the dates
or-
got messed up or something.
That's right.
I think we were,
So we said it was like an informal.
yeah,
something.
we didn't convene a meeting last time.
There we go. I knew there was a reason.
We had lunch, I think.
We did have lunch.
Right.
We had our parking, little parking. lot.
I'll just say,
It was
you know,
lovely.
beyond the Fairlife project, I think there are a couple of exciting projects in the hopper for 2024, knock on wood. So stay tuned, and, you know, I think things are moving in a positive direction for the county's economic development, and we have a role to play in all of that, so. Thank you all.
Great. All right, well, thank you, Greg, thank you, everyone.
Jeff, we just need a motion to recommend the budget to the full board.
So moved.
Seconded.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, opposed, motion carries. And the meeting is adjourned.